Senator, Apple has offered explanations on its practice of slowing down this software on phones with older batteries. They say it's to improve battery performance on those older phones. Why is that insufficient in your view?
Well, first off, it didn't happen until just recently. There have been, this has been suspected for a long time. And frankly, Apple just recently acknowledged that, in fact, they are slowing the processing speed as they update software, allegedly to prolong battery life. But we just don't think they've been sufficiently transparent with the American people. There are a lot of customers and consumers out there who have observed and noticed the changes in some of these Apple devices, and the fact that they would have those devices degraded in terms of their capabilities without them knowing why, I think, is what we're trying to get at. So we just think that Apple needs to be more forthcoming. They need to be more transparent and hopefully answer some of these questions that we're raising.
This was a direct letter to Tim Cook. Has Mr. Cook responded, and what remedial action do you want Apple to take here?
Well, he hasn't responded yet, but that would be a good first step. We've given him till January 23rd. We've given him a series of questions we'd like to get answers to, and then we'll figure out where we go from there. I mean, I think right now, we want to explore this a little bit further, and if they're responsive and the answers are satisfactory, then, that will probably change the calculus about what we might do next. But I think at this point, the real issue is getting to the bottom of this, getting these questions answered, and answered really for the American consumers, ultimately, who are those that have been harmed by some of these practices.
Senator, isn't this always the case? And actually, it happens too many times that these companies are forced into owning up or responding. I mean, it was the same with the Russian interference in the election, too. And I'm not just talking about Apple specifically here. I'm talking about a number of these tech names. Isn't the consumer being hurt here and let down, actually, by lawmakers who aren't pushing these guys to do more and to be more honest and upfront? Isn't greater regulation essential here?
Well, I think that oversight certainly is essential. I'm not a big fan of heavy-handed regulation. I do think we need the light touch of regulation, but I think we have to have transparency. And, we're going to ask them next week at a hearing that we're going to hold at the Commerce Committee to tell us what they're doing to prevent some of the extremism or radicalization that's happening on social media platforms. And I think that with what's happening in the world, you mentioned some of those things. These are tremendously powerful platforms that are incredibly important to our economy, and in many cases, of course, now to our national security. And so I think some appropriate oversight is that's what people expect us to do. The question with regard to the iPhones is one that we're going to try and get answers to, but there are other issues as well that I think the tech companies need to be forthcoming about, and all we're doing is exercising that oversight power that Congress has and I think should use.
Senator, I just want to let you know that the White House, according to official there, has indicated that there's no change in the president's position on NAFTA. And this follows after Bloomberg learned, according to Canadian government officials, that there's an increasing likelihood the president will give the 6 months notice to withdraw from the trade pact, from NAFTA. So they haven't said whether they think the president will quit NAFTA, but they think that the odds are increasing that he will start to begin the process of leaving NAFTA. What do you make of this potential move here by the president, according to Canadian government officials? Would this be a negotiating tactic?
I think that the administration is trying to keep all options on the table to get the best possible outcome they can in terms of modifications to NAFTA. But what I will tell you is there are many of us who are very concerned about the prospects of the United States withdrawing. And although it sounds like this latest rumor may be just that, we've tried to convey to the president and to his team that, particularly, I represent a state that agriculture is our #1 industry. And, 1 out of every 3 rows of corn and soybeans gets exported, and about 73% of that goes to Mexico. So these are important markets to us, and I know that they're trying to keep leverage on these negotiations, but the idea that the United States might withdraw from NAFTA, I think, would be incredibly harmful economically, not just to the middle of the country where agriculture is our #1 industry, but to the entire country.
Senator, I want to jump topics again now and talk about immigration reform and that bipartisan meeting that we saw yesterday. Coming out of that, you said, look, there's a path forward here, there's a deal on the table. What does that deal contain?
I think that, as you heard at the meeting they had yesterday at the White House, If there are border security measures involved with that, ending chain immigration, and then also dealing with the issue of these visa lotteries, these diversity lotteries, I think that we can get a path forward that allows the DACA issue to be dealt with. These young people or kids, when they came here, not little anymore, but figuring out a way to allow them to stay here legally, and in exchange for that, get some measures that we think would help prevent that sort of thing from happening in the future. And that's always been a priority for many of the Republicans in the Congress. We think border security has to accompany any of these immigration changes that are being talked about. But I think that's kind of the contours of a deal, and it seems to me, at least, if people come to the table in good faith, that we ought to be able to get there, and hopefully in a short amount of time. I doubt that that happens by Friday of next week, but I do hear from both sides that everybody is negotiating in good faith.